After high school, many years ago, I was in a bad place. My guardian had kicked me out after graduation. She didn't even help me find a place to stay, so I lived in my car for a couple of months. I met some heavy metal dudes at work one day. I had seen them around town, and all my other friends knew who they were. Everyone loved them. We became friends over a couple of months, and they offered me to move in with them. I agreed. Looking back now, I wish I would have just stayed in my car. My two main roommates were brothers, named Andrew and Seth. They were in a band. They also believed in the occult and anything of that sort. I never really believed in that stuff, but I'm not one to tell somebody what they should or shouldn't believe. They had me live with them rent-free for several months, so who was I to complain? Being the only female in the house full of young men, I was always looking over my shoulder. You never know who you can trust and who you can't. Turns out, I was right to worry. Over time, their friends started to stay with us for longer periods of time. Sometimes even weeks. Their friends were another group of brothers that they had gone to school with. There were 5 brothers in total, but only 2 stayed with us consistently. The younger brother, Mark, was very polite. He cleaned up after himself and he always helped with the household chores. The other brother, Adam, had a laundry list of problems. He had apparently done some bad drugs back in the day, and he developed some psychosis of the religious sort. He had actually done time in prison for assaulting a woman with a Bible. He would often look you in the eyes and tell you he could see how you would die. Once he told me that I was possessed by a demon and I needed my soul cleansed. Everyone in the house knew he had these problems, but he was their friend. They helped him through the hard times and they gave him a place to stay. Otherwise, he would be on the streets. No one else seemed to be as concerned as I was, but they should have been. One day, I was sleeping and my phone rang. It was my boss. He asked if I can come into work an hour early. It was only 12 p.m. I was broke and I had nothing better to do, so I said yes. I got up and began getting ready to leave. I walked out into the living room to see Mark and Andrew sitting on the couch and Adam sitting on the floor in front of the TV. He was watching scripture videos on YouTube, some real end-of-days shit. That was fairly common, so I went about my business, I said goodbye and I left for work. My shift at work was almost over when the phone rang. My boss answered, handed the phone to me and he said, "It's for you." I was just a cashier, so I assumed it was a friend that couldn't reach me on my phone. I answered the phone and I heard a man's voice that I didn't recognize. "Hi, this is Detective Williams. Something happened at your apartment today, and we need you to come to the station to talk about it." I left work immediately. I had assumed one of the brothers had been arrested for dealing drugs or something. I was very wrong. I got to the station, and I was buzzed in. An officer escorted me to a small, cold room with a camera. He gave me a bottle of water and left me by myself for about 30 minutes. My mind was racing, thinking about what could have happened. He came back in and informed me that Adam had stabbed and killed Andrew at around 1 p.m. I was shocked. I had just left the house an hour before it happened. Everything seemed fine. I asked if there had been a fight. The detective informed me that there hadn't been a fight, and it seemed to have happened out of nowhere. I gave my statement to the police and left with nowhere to go, still in shock and confused out of my mind. Our apartment was a crime scene, so I went to another friend's house to watch the news report, since the police wouldn't give me any information on the case. Over the next couple of days, the information began to be released. Adam hadn't just stabbed Andrew once, not twice, but he stabbed him over and over and over and nearly decapitated him. After the murder, he ran down the road, still holding the murder weapon. He called 911 and informed them of what he had done. I watched the news report in horror. We had known he was unstable, but this? He had fully confessed to the brutal murder and provided police with his notebooks. He had apparently been planning to murder all of us, his brothers, my roommates, and me. He thought we were all possessed by demons, and this was the only way that he could set us free. Luckily, none of the other intended victims were there that day. Mark unfortunately witnessed the murder, but he luckily escaped. If I hadn't gotten that call from my boss, I wouldn't be alive today. So to the man who brutally murdered my friend and wanted to murder me, let's never meet again. So this happened a year ago, and I'm still pretty shaken by the whole event. I thought I'd tell my story. I live in the UK, and in autumn, it gets dark around 4 p.m. There was a school autumn break that week, so all the kids were at home, so that means my girlfriend's brother was at home too. I'd been with her for a year at that point, so her family knew me pretty well, and her brother enjoyed my company. She'd recently been pretty stressed out. Her parents were going out across the country for the day, so she had to look after her little brother, but I thought I'd give her the day to herself so she can just kind of cool off. I asked her parents if I could look after their son for the day instead, and they agreed. So I came around 8 a.m., and they let me in before they set off. My girlfriend's brother woke up about an hour later, and she followed shortly afterwards. We went out for breakfast at a local cafe together and went back to her house when we were done. And once I dropped her off, I took her brother to the park. We got there about 2 p.m., and the place was pretty packed. Eventually, the sun started going down, and the place was completely empty by 4. I texted my girlfriend and told her that we'd be home in a bit, and she said okay. I'm gonna be honest, I completely lost track of time. Me and her brother stood on top of this really tall climbing frame with a slide on it. It was almost pitch black at this point, so I was using my phone as a flashlight. A notification popped up on my screen, and it was my girlfriend asking where we were. I responded, "Oops, we're coming home now," and told her brother that we had to go. He sighed and asked if he can go down the slide one more time. I said yes. Before I went down, I knew what the park looked like. There were streetlights all around it, benches everywhere, some trees, and a place for the kids to play. When I came out of the slide, there was something weird. A man had appeared out of nowhere, and he stood beneath one of the streetlights. He had a trench coat on and a beanie hat. I immediately got my girlfriend's brother behind me and called out to the man with a friendly, "Hi there." I got a response. He started groaning. I noticed that he was swaying back and forth in the light, and he had his mouth open. He was drooling with a blank look in his eyes. This man made me feel really fucking uneasy. I picked little bro up and kept checking on this guy the entire time. There was an exit to my left that led to a path home, so I left out that way and kept checking behind me every few seconds. The guy was still there. I was walking down the path for about 2 minutes, periodically checking behind me, and I thought I was in the clear, but I wasn't. I was on a straight stretch of path with lots of streetlights when I saw him again. He stood beneath one, looking up at it, and he was playing with something in his hands. I looked closer and realized it was a knife. I kept walking and walking, checking behind me constantly. My girlfriend's little brother was so scared that he had his head tucked into my chest. I noticed that the guy seemed to be moving to new streetlights whenever I would turn around. Initially, I thought it was my eyes playing tricks on me, but I started counting them, and then realized 2 streetlights behind him had definitely turned into 5. I could faintly hear the groaning noise, and he was occasionally moaning as well. I picked up the pace a bit and turned a corner, getting into the last stretch of street before I got to my girlfriend's house. That was when I heard him behind the row of bushes. That moaning noise sounded angry, and I heard his heavy footsteps bounding down the path. The man was running. I immediately broke into a sprint and didn't stop until I turned an alleyway at the front of the street and got behind my girlfriend's house. There's a big bush there, so I crouched down behind that and started spamming her phone with text messages to open up the back gate. I hugged her brother close until she opened it for us and got us in quickly. It felt like years. I went to the front of the house and had it confirmed that I managed to shake him. He was now in the street, circling where I had been, outside of the alleyway, just moments ago. He was still moaning. He had that knife in his hand, and he started kicking bins over. I called the police immediately, but he was gone by the time that they showed up. As far as I know, they never found him. There was a similar incident near the area a few months ago. I saw it on a local Facebook group, but I don't think anything came out of it. Her parents thanked me for keeping their son safe, and they didn't hold any ill will against me for the situation. He went back to normal pretty much the day after, but he still has nightmares about it. Funnily enough, when my country isn't in lockdown, I'm still allowed to look after him with my girlfriend. We haven't been to that park since, and I still check over my shoulder and break into a cold sweat every time I'm alone on the street.